In the older part of the city, where the buildings leaned against each other like tired friends, there was a narrow space between a bakery and a dry cleaner. This alley was not a place people went to relax. The ground was made of uneven stones that had been there for 100 years. The air usually smelled like old bread and cleaning fluid. At the very back of this tight space, pushed up against a brick wall that had turned black with years of city dust, sat a piano. It was not a beautiful instrument. The wood, which might have been a shiny dark color many years ago, was now dull and scratched. On one side, the leg had completely snapped off, so the piano was listing heavily to the right. To keep it from falling over, someone had stuck a stack of old yellow phone books under the corner. It looked like a sad, abandoned animal that had been left behind by a moving truck. Most people who walked past the alley didn't even look at it. They were too busy. They held phones to their ears or carried bags of groceries. They walked fast, their eyes on the pavement. To them, the piano wasn't an instrument. It was just a large piece of garbage taking up space. They assumed that eventually, the city workers would come with a big truck and smash it into pieces to throw it away. It was silent. It had no voice. It was just an object in the shadows. But there was one man who noticed it. His name was Mr. Arthur. He was a man in his late 70s, with thinning white hair and a face that looked like a folded paper map. He wore the same gray coat every day, winter or summer, and walked with a cane that tapped rhythmically against the stones. Every afternoon at exactly 4 o'clock, Arthur would walk down the street. He didn't walk fast. He walked slowly, as if he were looking for something he had lost a long time ago. When Arthur reached the alley, he would always stop. He wouldn't just glance and keep going. He would turn his body and step a few feet into the narrow space. He would stand there for a long time, just looking at the broken piano. Sometimes he would sigh, a sound that was so quiet it was swallowed by the noise of the traffic on the main street. He never tried to play it. He never touched the keys. He just watched it, as if he were expecting it to wake up and start talking to him. One Tuesday, Arthur reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. It was a faded blue color. He leaned forward, wincing slightly as his back creaked, and he began to wipe the dust off the top of the piano. He wiped around the empty music rack. He wiped the sides where the varnish had peeled away. He worked gently, taking care not to scratch it any further. A young woman was walking past, rushing to catch a bus. She stopped for a second when she saw Arthur. She looked at the old man wiping the trash, and she shook her head slightly. She probably thought he was a bit crazy in the head, cleaning something that was going to be destroyed. She didn't understand. To her, it was wood and wires. To Arthur, it was a memory. Arthur finished his task and stepped back to look at his work. The piano didn't look new, not even close. It still looked broken. It still looked sad. But the thick layer of gray dust was gone. The scratches looked a little cleaner. It looked like someone cared that it existed. Maybe tomorrow, Arthur whispered to the empty air. He tapped his cane on the ground, turned around, and continued his slow walk down the street. As the sun went down, the alley changed. The bright afternoon light faded, replaced by the yellow glow of the street lamps on the main road. The shadows in the alley grew long and stretchy. The noise of the city died down a little bit, replaced by the distant sound of sirens and the hum of refrigerators in the apartments above. It was during this time, when the sky turned a deep purple, that the alley wasn't empty anymore. Up on the third floor of the apartment building that overlooked the alley, a light went on in a small window. The room inside was very simple. There was a bed, a small table, and a chair. There were no posters on the walls, no toys on the floor. It was a room for sleeping, not for playing. Living there was a boy named Leo. He was 12 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that always fell into his eyes. He didn't have many friends at school. He was the kind of kid who sat in the back of the classroom and stared out the window. When the teacher asked him a question, he would often freeze up, his mind going blank, even though he knew the answer. The other kids thought he was slow. They thought he didn't understand anything. They didn't know that Leo was thinking about things that were much too big to say out loud. That evening, Leo sat at his small table. He had a notebook open in front of him. He was supposed to be doing his math homework. The numbers swam on the page. 4 times 7. 12 divided by 3. It looked like a different language to him. He tapped his pencil on the paper. Tap, Tap, tap. He couldn't focus. His head felt full of noise, a buzzing sound that wouldn't go away. He felt anxious and cramped, like he needed to run but had nowhere to go. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked down. 3 stories below, he could see the alley. The street lamp outside cast a cone of light right onto the broken piano. Leo looked around his small room. He looked at his math book. He looked at the closed door to the hallway. He knew he wasn't supposed to go out this late. But the noise in his head was getting louder. The numbers were swimming faster. He needed to let the air out. He opened the window quietly. It was an old window, and it slid up with a groan. He stepped out onto the fire escape. The metal was cold under his sneakers. He climbed down the first set of stairs, his heart beating a little faster. He was doing something wrong. But the pull of the alley was stronger than the rules. When he reached the second level, he hopped over the railing onto a dumpster, then down to the ground. He landed softly, bending his knees like a cat. He stood still for a moment, listening. The city was loud, but this alley was quiet. He walked toward the brick wall. There it was. The broken piano. Up close, it smelled like mold and old wood. The keys were yellow and cracked. Some of them were missing entirely, leaving little black gaps of empty space. Leo reached out and touched one of the keys. It felt rough like old bone. He sat down on the small bench. It wobbled dangerously. He didn't know how to read music. He had never taken a lesson. He couldn't tell you the difference between a treble clef and a bass clef. But as his fingers hovered over the keys, the noise in his head suddenly stopped. The numbers, the anxiety, the feeling of being different, it all vanished. Leo pressed a key. It made a dull thunk. It didn't ring. The piano was too broken for that. But Leo didn't care. He pressed another key. Then another. He began to play a simple rhythm. Thump-thump, thump-thump. It wasn't a song anyone knew. It wasn't Beethoven or Mozart. It was just a sound. To anyone walking by, it would have sounded like a child banging on a piece of furniture. It was noise. It was ugly. But to Leo, it was the only way he could speak. He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw colors. He saw shapes. The rhythm changed. His left hand found a low note that buzzed against the brick wall. His right hand danced over the high notes, the ones that didn't stick. He was playing a story. He was playing about the feeling of running fast and not getting tired. He was playing about the way the moon looked through the clouds. He was playing the sadness he felt when he couldn't answer the teacher's question. He sat there for an hour, hidden in the shadows of the alley. The only light came from the street lamp above, which made his silhouette look ghostly against the wall. He didn't make loud music. The piano was too weak for that. He made quiet music. Secret music. It was a conversation between a lonely boy and a forgotten instrument, and nobody else in the city knew it was happening. When the church clock in the distance struck 9 times, Leo stopped. He opened his eyes. The cold air was starting to bite at his fingers. He stood up and gently closed the fallboard over the keys, covering the yellow ivory. He patted the side of the piano, the same spot where Mr. Arthur had wiped away the dust earlier that day. Leo climbed back up the fire escape, his body tired but his mind finally quiet. He slipped back through his window and closed it tight. He sat back down at his table, looked at the math book, and turned the page. Down below, the alley was empty again. The piano sat in the dark, silent once more, waiting for the next hand to bring it to life. The days moved slowly in the apartment building, but for Leo, the nights were the only time that really mattered. He lived 2 different lives. When the sun was up, he was just the quiet boy in the back of the classroom. He wore a hoodie that was a size too big and kept his head down. He walked through the hallways of his school like a ghost, trying hard not to bump into anyone or make eye contact. The teachers would sometimes call his name, their voices sounding far away, and he would jump. They would sigh and mark something down on their papers, thinking he wasn't paying attention. But he was paying attention. He was just paying attention to the music in his head that never stopped playing. At school, they wanted him to read books about history and solve equations that looked like snakes squirming on the page. None of it made sense to him. The letters would scramble together. The numbers would float away. He felt like he was trying to catch water with his hands. The other kids laughed sometimes when he read out loud and stumbled over a word. He would feel his face get hot and red. He would wish he could disappear. But as soon as the final bell rang, Leo would grab his backpack and walk home fast. He didn't look at the other kids. He didn't try to join their games. He had a destination. He had a purpose. When he got home, his mother was usually there. She was a kind woman with tired eyes and hands that smelled like soap from her job at the laundromat. She loved Leo very much, but she worried about him constantly. She saw a boy who didn't fit in. She saw the report cards with low grades. She saw him sitting alone in his room. "Did you make any friends today, Leo?" she would ask while she chopped vegetables for soup. Leo would shake his head. "No," he would say. "It's okay. I like being alone." His mother would look at him with a sad face. "You shouldn't be alone all the time, Leo. It's not good for a person." She didn't understand. Leo wasn't alone when he was thinking about music. In his head, there were entire orchestras playing. He would hear violins and drums while he ate his dinner. He would hear a deep bass sound while he brushed his teeth. He wanted to tell her about it, but he didn't have the words. How do you explain a color to someone who has never seen it? How do you explain a feeling that has no name? After dinner, Leo would help wash the dishes. He would dry the plates carefully, making sure not to drop them. The clock on the wall would tick loudly. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It was counting down the hours. At 8 o'clock, his mother would go to her room to read or watch television. She would leave her door open a crack, just to keep an ear out for him. This was Leo's signal. He would go into his own room and turn off the light. He wouldn't get into bed yet. He would wait. He would sit in the dark and let his eyes adjust to the shadows. He would listen to the sounds of the building. He would hear the neighbors walking upstairs, heavy footsteps that shook the ceiling. He would hear a dog barking a few streets away. He would hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. When the hallway outside his apartment went silent, Leo knew it was time. He would put on his sneakers, quietly tying the laces so they wouldn't make a noise. He would open his window. The night air was always cooler than the daytime air. It smelled different too, like concrete and exhaust fumes, but also like the open sky. Climbing down the fire escape had become second nature to him. He knew exactly which metal step squeaked if you put your weight on the left side, and which one was safe. He moved like a shadow, flowing down the ladder until he hit the pavement of the alley. It was dark down there, away from the streetlights. The only light came from the moon, which was just a thin slice tonight. Leo walked toward the brick wall. He could see the outline of the piano. It looked like a sleeping beast. He sat down on the bench. It was cold. The air nipped at his ears and his fingers, but he didn't mind. The cold made him feel awake. Leo didn't start with a song. He started by just touching the keys. He liked the feel of the plastic and ivory under his fingertips. He would press a key, listen to the sound die away, and then press another. It was like saying hello to an old friend. The piano was in terrible shape. The lowest notes didn't make a sound at all. They just clicked. The highest notes sounded like someone hitting a tin can with a spoon. But the middle notes, the ones in the heart of the keyboard, still had a voice. It was a tired, scratchy voice, but it was there. Leo took a deep breath. He closed his eyes. He let his hands hover over the keys for a second, and then he dropped them. Sound filled the alley. To anyone else, it might have sounded like a mess. Because the piano was out of tune, playing a standard song would sound wrong. But Leo wasn't playing standard songs. He was playing what the piano wanted to play. He was playing the song of the broken streets. He started with a slow, sad rhythm in his left hand. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a heartbeat. Then his right hand began to dance. He played fast, sharp notes that pierced the darkness. The music wasn't happy, and it wasn't just sad. It was angry. It was frustrated. It was the feeling of wanting to scream but having no mouth. Leo played and his body swayed. He forgot that he was sitting on a wobbly bench in a dirty alley. He forgot that he had a math test coming up that he was going to fail. He forgot that the other kids laughed at him. The only thing that existed was the vibration of the strings inside the wood. He played a melody that was complicated and beautiful. It twisted and turned, going high and then diving low. It sounded like water rushing through a drain, and then like birds flying into a storm. It was the sound of Leo's soul. All the things he couldn't say to his mother, all the things he couldn't say to his teachers, he said with his fingers. On this particular night, the music was flowing better than usual. Leo felt like his hands weren't even attached to his body. They were moving on their own. He was playing a complicated series of chords, moving his hands fast up and down the keyboard. He was playing something that sounded like a storm clearing up. The angry notes turned into something hopeful, something that sounded like light breaking through clouds. He was so lost in the music that he didn't hear the footsteps on the main street. Mr. Arthur was having a bad night. He was in his apartment, which was on the first floor of a building facing the street. He couldn't sleep. His legs were aching, a sharp pain that shot through his knees no matter how he sat or lay down. He had tried hot tea, but it didn't help. He had tried reading, but the words swam in front of his eyes. At midnight, he gave up. He grabbed his cane and his gray coat. He decided to walk. Walking sometimes helped the pain, kept the blood moving. He stepped out of his front door into the cool night air. The city was quieter now, but it was never truly silent. He walked slowly, tapping his cane. Clop tap, clop tap. He wasn't planning to go anywhere special, but his feet seemed to have a mind of their own. They turned the corner toward the alley where the bakery and the dry cleaner were. He thought about the piano he had dusted earlier. He wondered if the city had finally taken it away. As he got closer to the alley, he stopped walking. Arthur frowned. He tilted his head to the side. He heard something. It wasn't a car horn. It wasn't a siren. It wasn't a cat fighting. It was music. He stood perfectly still on the sidewalk, listening. The sound was drifting out from the narrow space between the buildings. It was faint, but it was clear. It was piano music. And it wasn't just simple banging. It was fast. It was complex. It had layers. Arthur felt a shiver go down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold night air. He knew there was no electricity in the alley. He knew the piano was broken. Who could be playing? He tightened his grip on his cane and walked slowly toward the mouth of the alley. He didn't want to scare whoever it was. He moved quietly, stepping on the balls of his feet to muffle the sound of his shoes. As he stepped into the shadows of the alley, the music got louder. He saw the cone of light from the street lamp hitting the piano. And he saw the boy. Arthur squinted his eyes. He saw the small figure sitting on the bench. He saw the oversized hoodie. He saw the way the boy's body moved, swaying back and forth, completely lost in the moment. The music changed again. It became softer, gentler. The notes floated up into the air, bouncing off the brick walls. It was the most beautiful thing Arthur had heard in years. It sounded like a memory. It sounded like something he had forgotten he was missing. Arthur stayed in the shadows. He didn't speak. He didn't want to break the spell. He just leaned against the brick wall near the entrance and listened. He watched the boy's hands fly over the keys, hitting the chipped ivory, pressing down on the stubborn pedals with his sneakers. For the first time in a long time, the pain in Arthur's legs went away. He forgot about his aching back. He forgot about his empty apartment. He stood there in the dark, entranced by the genius of a lonely boy playing a broken piano in the middle of the night. The song ended slowly. The final note hung in the air for a long time before fading away into the sounds of the city. Leo sat there, his hands resting on the keys, his chest moving up and down fast. He felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. It was the feeling you get after running a long race. He kept his eyes closed for a moment, letting the quiet come back to the alley. Then he opened his eyes. He turned his head to grab his backpack, which was sitting on the ground next to the stack of phone books. But he stopped. His body went stiff. At the entrance of the alley, standing just outside the shadow of the street lamp, was a figure. Leo's heart jumped into his throat. He pulled his hands back from the piano as if the keys had suddenly turned red hot. He was used to being alone down here. He had never seen anyone else at this time of night. For a second, he thought it might be a police officer. He thought he was in trouble for trespassing, or for making noise, or just for being somewhere he didn't belong. He started to stand up, his mind racing with excuses. He would say he was just walking through. He would say he found it like this. But his legs felt heavy, and he couldn't move fast enough. The figure stepped forward into the light. It was the old man. The one Leo had seen walking down the street sometimes. The one with the cane and the gray coat. Leo had seen him wiping the dust off the piano a few weeks ago. They had never spoken. Leo didn't even know his name. Leo froze. He felt small and exposed. He felt like a secret that had been suddenly shouted out loud. The magic of the music vanished, replaced by the cold reality of a 12-year-old boy sitting on a junk heap in the middle of the night. He looked down at his sneakers, waiting for the old man to yell at him to go home. Or worse, to laugh at him. But the old man didn't yell. He didn't laugh. He just walked closer, the tap of his cane echoing softly against the brick walls. He stopped a few feet away from the piano. He looked at Leo with a face that was hard to read in the dim light. "I didn't mean to scare you," the old man said. His voice was raspy, like dry leaves rubbing together. Leo didn't say anything. He just gripped the edge of the bench with his hands. "I was walking past," the man continued. "I heard the music. It was very beautiful." Leo looked up, surprised. He wasn't used to adults calling him beautiful at anything. Usually, they talked about his grades or his untied shoelaces. He felt a blush rise on his cheeks, but in the dark, hopefully, the man couldn't see it. "I was just leaving," Leo mumbled. He started to grab his bag again, ready to run up the fire escape and hide in his room. "Wait," the old man said gently. He reached into his pocket. Leo flinched slightly, thinking he might be pulling out a phone to call someone, or maybe a badge. But instead, he pulled out a small, black metal object. It was a wrench. A small one. The man reached into his other pocket and took out a small battery-operated light. It was the kind mechanics use to look under car hoods. He held them up. "I saw this piano sitting here," the man said, leaning a little on his cane. "And I see you playing it. You are very good. You have a gift. But this piano, it is fighting against you." Leo looked at the man, confused. "It's broken," he said. "It is," the man agreed. "But it doesn't have to sound quite so bad." The man stepped forward and placed the small light on top of the piano, clipping it to the music stand. He clicked a switch. A bright, focused beam of light shone down onto the keys. It made the yellowed ivory look almost golden. Then, he held up the wrench. "I used to work with tools a long time ago," the man said. "If you want, I can try to tighten the pins that hold the wires. It won't make it perfect, but it might make it stay in tune a little better. It hurts my ears to hear such a nice song come out of a box that sounds like it's coughing." Leo looked at the light. He looked at the wrench. He looked at the old man's face. The man didn't look angry. He didn't look like he wanted to take Leo away. He looked like he just wanted to help. He looked like he understood that the piano wasn't just trash. Slowly, Leo nodded. The old man smiled. It was a small smile that made deep wrinkles appear around his eyes. He moved slowly, groaning a little as he lowered himself onto his knees. He opened the top part of the piano, the lid that covered the strings. It creaked as it went up, revealing a mess of dusty strings and wooden hammers inside. "Come here," the man said. "Shine the light for me." Leo slid off the bench and sat on the dirty ground next to the man. He held the little light steady. The man reached in with the wrench. His hands were shaking a little bit, maybe from age, maybe from the cold, but he was careful. He fitted the wrench onto a square metal pin. "When you hit a key," the man explained softly, not looking up, "a felt hammer hits a wire. If the pin is loose, the wire goes slack, and the note sounds flat. We just need to tighten it a little." He turned the wrench slightly. "Creak. Play the note," he commanded. Leo reached over and pressed the key that corresponded to the wire the man was holding. It sounded different. It was clearer. It had a ping to it that wasn't there before. "Better?" the man asked. "Yeah," Leo whispered. "Much better." They worked like that for a long time. It was a strange scene in the dark alley. An old man with a cane and a young boy with a hoodie, huddled over a broken instrument. Sometimes the man would tell Leo which key to press. Sometimes he would just listen. They didn't talk much. There was a comfortable silence between them, filled only by the sound of the wrench turning and the testing of the notes. They only tuned a few notes. It was too hard to do them all by hand in the dark, and the piano was too far gone. But the notes in the middle range, the ones Leo used the most, they began to sound sharper. They began to sound like they belonged together. While the man worked, Leo looked at him closely. He saw the way the man's coat was frayed at the cuffs. He saw the way his breathing was a little heavy, like he was in pain. Leo realized that this man must be lonely too. Why else would an old man be out in the alley at midnight fixing a junk piano? "What's your name?" Leo asked suddenly. The man stopped tightening a pin. He paused for a moment. "Arthur," he said. "I'm Leo." "Hello, Leo," Arthur said. He looked at the boy. "You play like you are running away from something, Leo. And then, sometimes, you play like you are coming home." Leo looked down at the ground. He kicked a small stone with his shoe. "I just like it," he mumbled. He didn't know how to explain that the music was the only place where he felt smart. The only place where he felt free. Arthur patted the side of the piano. "Well, the piano likes you too. I can tell." After about an hour, Arthur tried to stand up. His knees popped loudly, and he winced. He grabbed his cane and pushed himself up, breathing in sharply through his teeth. Leo jumped up to help him, offering his arm. Arthur took it, squeezing Leo's thin forearm with a surprisingly strong grip. "Thank you, Leo," Arthur said, steadying himself. "My old bones aren't made for sitting on cold stone." Leo felt a warm feeling in his chest. He had never helped an adult before. It was usually the other way around. "We should get you home," Arthur said. "It is late." "Are you going to tell anyone?" Leo asked, looking up at him with wide eyes. "About me playing here?" Arthur looked at the boy. He saw the fear in his eyes. He saw the talent that was bubbling over inside him. He shook his head slowly. "No," Arthur said. "This will be our secret. Everyone needs a place where they can be themselves. This piano, it belongs to the alley. And tonight, it belongs to you." Leo let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Okay." Arthur took the small light off the music stand, but then he paused. He thought for a second. He clipped it back on. "Keep the light," Arthur said. "It is hard to see your own hands in the dark. You need to see what you are doing." Leo stared at the light. It was a nice light. "I can't take this. I have plenty of things in my apartment gathering dust," Arthur said, waving his hand dismissively. "This light needs to be used. It is happy here." Leo smiled. It was a small, genuine smile that made his face look different. Younger, but also older at the same time. "Thank you, Mr. Arthur." "You are welcome, Leo." Arthur tapped his cane on the ground. "Go on now. Climb up before your feet freeze." Leo grabbed his backpack. He looked at the piano one last time. Under the little light, it didn't look like a piece of garbage anymore. It looked like a shrine. It looked cared for. He climbed onto the dumpster and pulled himself up the fire escape. He climbed quickly, his feet clanging on the metal. When he got to his window, he didn't go inside right away. He sat on the fire escape and looked down. Mr. Arthur was still standing there. The old man was looking up at the window, watching to make sure Leo got in safe. He lifted his hand in a small wave. Leo waved back. Then, Arthur turned his collar up against the night air and began his slow walk out of the alley, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The tap echoed off the walls, sounding almost like a beat, like a song ending. Leo slipped through his window and closed it tight. He lay down on his bed, but he didn't go to sleep immediately. He listened to the silence of his room. But it wasn't a bad silence anymore. He knew that 3 stories below, there was a piano with a few perfect notes, and an old man who knew his name. And for the first time in his life, the noise in his head was completely quiet, replaced by the sound of a better tune. Weeks went by, and a quiet routine formed in the alley. The city didn't change. The cars still drove by too fast, and the people still hurried past without looking up. But down in the narrow space between the brick buildings, something special was happening. Every night, as soon as the moon appeared, Leo would climb down the fire escape. And almost every night, Mr. Arthur would be there. The old man would bring a folding chair from his apartment sometimes, setting it up a few feet away from the piano. He stopped trying to tune the piano because he had done as much as he could with his old wrench. The strings were rusty, and the hammers were worn, but the middle section sounded decent. It was good enough. Leo didn't just play the same angry songs anymore. He started to experiment. With Mr. Arthur watching, he felt safer to try new things. He played soft songs that sounded like rain hitting a window, gentle and tapping. He played fast songs that sounded like a chase, full of energy and speed. Sometimes he would mess up. His fingers would slip, or he would hit a wrong key that sounded terrible. In the past, a wrong note would make Leo stop. It would make him feel stupid, and he would want to quit. But now, when he hit a sour note, he would just look over at Mr. Arthur. The old man would be sitting there, nodding his head or tapping his cane on the ground, keeping the beat. He never frowned. He never told Leo to do it perfectly. He just listened. And that made Leo brave enough to keep going, to fix the mistake, and to turn the bad note into part of the song. They developed a way of talking without speaking. Leo would play a line of music, a question, and Mr. Arthur would hum a note back, an answer. It was a conversation. It was a friendship built on vibrations and rhythm, not words. One Tuesday, the air was different. It was crisp and cold. It smelled like snow, even though none had fallen yet. Leo came down the fire escape holding his jacket tight around him. He sat at the piano, but his hands were cold. He rubbed them together to get the blood moving. Mr. Arthur arrived a few minutes later. He wasn't carrying his folding chair tonight. He was walking slowly, very slowly. He looked more tired than usual. His face was pale, and he had a scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. "Evening, Leo," Arthur said. His voice sounded weaker, like a wind instrument with a small leak in it. "Hi, Mr. Arthur," Leo said. "Are you okay?" Arthur waved his hand slightly. "Just the winter getting into these old bones, Leo. Don't you worry about me." He leaned against the brick wall instead of sitting down. "Play something for me tonight. Play something warm." Leo nodded. He placed his cold fingers on the keys. He started to play a song he had been thinking about all day at school. It was slow and heavy, full of deep chords in the lower part of the piano. The sound rumbled through the alley, bouncing off the dumpsters and the metal fences. It was a song that felt like a hug. It felt like sitting in front of a fire when it is freezing outside. As Leo played, he watched Mr. Arthur out of the corner of his eye. The old man had his eyes closed. His head was leaning back against the rough bricks. A small smile was on his face. The pain in his legs seemed to fade away while the boy played. For those 10 minutes, Arthur wasn't a lonely old man with aching joints. He was anywhere he wanted to be. He was traveling on the music. When the song ended, the silence that followed was heavy, but it was a good heavy. It felt like peace. "Thank you, Leo," Arthur whispered. He pushed himself off the wall. He seemed unsteady on his feet. "I think I need to get inside where it is warm tonight. I can feel a storm coming in my knees." Leo stood up. "I can help you walk to your door," he offered. Arthur smiled. "You are a good boy, Leo. But I can manage. You stay here and practice. You are getting better every night. Don't stop." Leo watched as the old man walked away. He walked even slower than usual. He stopped once to catch his breath, holding onto a lamppost before turning the corner. Leo felt a worry in his stomach that he couldn't explain. He wanted to run after him, but he knew Arthur wanted to do it himself. Leo sat back down at the piano. He played a few more scales, his fingers flying up and down the keys, but his heart wasn't in it now. He played until his fingers were too cold to move, then he packed up and climbed back to his room. The next day was a Saturday. Leo woke up late. The sky was gray and low. The wind was blowing hard, rattling the window pane. It was the kind of day where you just want to stay under the blankets. Leo ate some cereal and looked out the window. He hoped Mr. Arthur was staying warm. Around noon, Leo heard a car engine outside his window. It wasn't just a passing car. It stopped right in front of the building. Leo looked out. A fancy blue car was parked there. It was shiny and clean, standing out against the dirty gray street. A man got out of the car. He was wearing a long coat and a scarf that looked very expensive. He had glasses and neat hair. He didn't look like he belonged in this neighborhood. He looked like he belonged in a picture frame. He checked a piece of paper in his hand, looked up at the building, and then walked toward the main entrance. Leo watched him go inside. A few minutes later, the man came back out and started walking down the street, looking at the building numbers. He looked confused. Leo opened his window. It was hard to hear because of the wind, but he saw the man stop a woman on the sidewalk. The man pointed at the alley. The woman shook her head and pointed further down the street. The man walked toward the alley. Leo frowned. He didn't know who this was. He watched the man step into the alley entrance. The man stopped. He was listening. Leo realized the man could hear the piano. Even through the closed window and the wind, the sound of the piano carried. Leo wasn't playing it, but sometimes the wind made the strings hum if they were hit just right by the screen door. But then Leo saw the man react. The man's head snapped up. He must have heard something, or maybe he just saw the piano sitting there in the shadows. The man walked into the alley. He didn't care about the mud or the trash. He walked right up to the broken piano. Leo quickly grabbed his shoes. He put them on and ran out of his apartment door. He took the stairs 2 at a time, jumping down the flights until he hit the ground floor. He ran out the back door and into the alley. When he got there, he stopped. The fancy man was standing over the piano, looking at it with a serious expression. He reached out and touched the side of the piano. Then, he saw Leo. The man didn't smile. He didn't look angry either. He looked curious. "Hello," the man said. His voice was deep and clear. "Do you play this instrument?" Leo stepped back, putting his hands in his pockets. "Sometimes," he said cautiously. "It's just junk." The man shook his head. "Junk does not make the sound I heard a moment ago. My name is Dr. Thorne. I am a teacher of music at the university across town." Leo's eyes went wide. "A university teacher? Here." "I was looking for an address," Dr. Thorne said, "but I think I got lost. And then I heard something. It sounded like jazz, but not written down jazz. It sounded like it was being invented right now." Leo didn't know what to say. He felt shy all over again. "I was just playing around." Dr. Thorne took a step closer. "You play by ear? You cannot read music." Leo shook his head. "No, I don't know how." Dr. Thorne looked at the broken piano, then back at Leo. He looked at the boy's worn-out sneakers and his thin jacket. He saw the genius that was hiding in the alley. "Music is not just about reading dots on a page," Dr. Thorne said gently. "It is about hearing and feeling. And you, young man, have something very rare inside you." I stood there for 1 minute, and I heard more emotion in your playing than I hear from students who have practiced for 20 years. Leo felt his face getting hot. "Really?" "Yes," Dr. Thorne said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a card. He handed it to Leo. It was smooth and white. "There is a youth program at the university. For gifted children. It starts on Saturday mornings. We have grand pianos there. Pianos that are in tune. Pianos that have all their legs." Leo looked at the card. Asterisk Department of Music. Dr. Robert Thorne. Asterisk. "I don't have any money," Leo whispered. "And I don't have a piano." "The scholarship is free," Dr. Thorne said. "And we have the pianos. You just need to bring your hands and your ears." Leo looked down at the card. He looked at the broken alley piano. He thought about the nights in the cold, playing for the brick wall. He thought about Mr. Arthur and how he said Leo had a gift. "Will I have to read music?" Leo asked. "We will teach you," Dr. Thorne said. "It is just a language. You already know the music in your heart. We just have to teach your brain the letters so you can write it down for others." Dr. Thorne looked at his watch. "I have to go to an appointment. But I want you to call me. Or come to that address. Saturday, 9 in the morning. Can you do that?" Leo looked up at the tall building. He thought about his mother working at the laundromat. He thought about being scared. But then he looked at the piano. He looked at the spot where Mr. Arthur usually sat. "I will try," Leo said. "Don't try," Dr. Thorne said seriously. "Just be there." The man turned and walked out of the alley, got into his shiny blue car, and drove away. Leo stood there alone in the alley. The wind was still blowing, but he didn't feel cold anymore. He clutched the card tight in his hand. He walked over to the piano and sat down. He played one chord. It sounded better than it ever had before. He wasn't just a boy in the alley anymore. He was a musician, and someone had finally heard him. The week that followed felt like a dream to Leo. Every day at school, he would reach into his pocket and touch the edges of the business card Dr. Thorne had given him. It was smooth and crisp, a stark contrast to the crumpled math homework in his bag. The card was real. The invitation was real. But a part of him was still scared. He felt like an imposter. He wasn't a musician. He was just a kid who liked to bang on old keys in the dark. He didn't go down to the alley much that week. The nights were cold, and he needed to sleep. But more importantly, he didn't want to hurt his fingers. He didn't tell his mother about the card yet. He wanted to wait until he had actually gone to the university, until he knew for sure that he wasn't going to be laughed out of the building. He wanted to have something true to show her before he gave her hope. On Saturday morning, the sun was actually shining. It was a rare thing for the city. The light hit the dirty windows of Leo's apartment and made the dust motes dance in the air. Leo woke up early. He put on his cleanest jeans and a hoodie that didn't have holes in the elbows. He ate his toast quickly, his stomach fluttering with nerves. "Where are you going, Leo?" his mother asked. She was folding laundry in the living room. "Just out," Leo said. "I might go to the library." She looked at him, surprised. Usually, he stayed in his room on weekends. "Okay. Be back for lunch." Leo nodded. He grabbed his backpack, checked his pocket for the card one last time, and ran out the door. He walked to the bus stop. He had to take 2 buses to get to the other side of the city where the university was. As the bus drove across town, the buildings started to change. They were taller. They were made of glass and shiny stone instead of old red brick. The streets were cleaner. There were trees planted in neat rows along the sidewalks. Leo looked out the window, feeling small. He felt like he was entering a different world, a world where people didn't leave pianos in alleys to rot. He got off at the main gate of the university. It was huge. There were students walking everywhere with books and coffee cups. They looked so grown-up and smart. Leo gripped the straps of his backpack and followed the map on his phone until he found the building for the School of Music. It was a giant building made of white stone. When he walked inside, the air smelled like floor wax and old paper. It was quiet, but not a heavy quiet like the alley. It was a respectful quiet. He walked down a long hallway until he found the door with a number Dr. Thorne had written on the card. He took a deep breath. He knocked. "Come in," a voice called. Leo opened the heavy door. Inside, the room was big. It had high ceilings and bookshelves that went all the way to the roof. But in the center of the room, dominating everything, was a piano. Leo stopped. He had never seen a piano like this. It was black and shiny, so shiny that Leo could see his own reflection in the side. It stood on 3 gold wheels, perfectly straight. It didn't look like furniture. It looked like a machine, or a piece of art. It was a grand piano. Dr. Thorne was sitting at a desk in the corner. He stood up when he saw Leo. He was wearing a nice suit today, not the coat he had worn in the alley. But his smile was the same. "Hello, Leo," Dr. Thorne said. "You found the place." "Yes, sir," Leo said softly. His voice echoed a little bit in the big room. Come in," the doctor said. He walked over to the piano. "This is a Steinway. It is a very famous instrument. Do you want to touch it?" Leo walked slowly toward it. He felt like he was approaching a sleeping lion. He reached out his hand and touched the lid. It was smooth and cool. It felt completely different from the splintered wood in the alley. "Sit down," Dr. Thorne said. Leo sat on the bench. It was padded and soft. It didn't wobble. He looked at the keys. They were perfectly white. They were not chipped or yellow. They looked like fresh snow. "Play something," Dr. Thorne said. "Just a little bit. Like you did in the alley." Leo hesitated. He was scared. This piano was worth more than his apartment building, probably. If he hit a wrong note, it would sound terrible in this quiet room. He looked at Dr. Thorne. The doctor nodded. Leo placed his hands on the keys. He took a breath. He closed his eyes so he wouldn't be distracted by the shiny room. He imagined he was back in the alley. He imagined the brick wall, the smell of the air, and Mr. Arthur leaning against the wall. He pressed a key. The sound that came out was incredible. It wasn't a dull thunk. It was a rich golden bell tone that filled the whole room. It resonated in Leo's chest. He played another note. Then a chord. The piano sang. It was like the instrument was alive and happy to be played. Leo started to play the song he had played for Mr. Arthur that night. The song that sounded like a warm hug. On this piano, it sounded completely different. It sounded bigger. It sounded like a whole orchestra was playing with him. The notes hung in the air, vibrating perfectly. The low notes rumbled like thunder, and the high notes sparkled like stars. Leo forgot he was nervous. He forgot where he was. He let his fingers fly. He played the anger, he played the hope, he played the loneliness. He poured his entire life into the keys of this shiny black machine. He played for 10 minutes, sweat forming on his forehead, his body swaying back and forth. When he finished, he lifted his hands off the keys. The last note faded away into the silence of the high ceiling. Leo opened his eyes. He was breathing hard. He looked at Dr. Thorne. The doctor wasn't smiling anymore. He looked stunned. He was staring at Leo with his mouth slightly open. He walked over to the piano slowly. "Leo," Dr. Thorne said quietly, "that was extraordinary. You have the most natural phrasing I have ever heard in a student your age. You don't just hit the notes. You speak with them." Leo looked down at the keys. "Does that mean I can stay?" Dr. Thorne laughed. It was a happy sound. "Stay? We are going to build a whole future for you here, Leo. I want you to come here every Saturday. I will teach you how to read the notes. I will teach you theory. But I want you to promise me one thing." "What?" Leo asked. "Never lose the sound you have in your heart. The schools can teach you the rules, but you have the magic." Leo smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt proud of himself. He wasn't the slow kid in the back of the class anymore. He was a musician. They talked for a long time about the schedule and what Leo would need. When they were done, Dr. Thorne walked him to the door. "Next week, bring your mother," Dr. Thorne said. "I want to explain the scholarship to her." "I will," Leo promised. Leo walked out of the building. The sun was high in the sky now. He felt light. He felt like he could float all the way home. He took the bus back, his head resting against the window, humming the song he had just played. When he got back to his neighborhood, the sun was starting to go down. The alley was in the shadows again. Leo didn't go straight up to his apartment. He went to the mouth of the alley and looked inside. The piano was still there. It was still broken. It still had the stack of phone books under the corner. It still looked like a piece of junk. But to Leo, it looked beautiful. It was where it all started. He saw a figure standing near the piano. It was Mr. Arthur. The old man was standing there, looking at the bench, waiting. Leo ran down the alley. "Mr. Arthur," he called out. The old man turned around. He looked a little better today, but he still leaned heavily on his cane. "Leo," he said, "I was wondering if you were coming down tonight. I brought some hot chocolate in a thermos. It's cold out here." Leo stopped in front of him. He was breathing fast from running. "Mr. Arthur, I went to the university. I went to the music school." Arthur's eyes widened. "You did?" "Yes. I played a real piano. A big one. And the teacher, he said I am good. He said I can come there every week. He said I have a gift." Mr. Arthur stared at him. Then slowly, a wide smile spread across his face. It was the biggest smile Leo had ever seen on him. The old man reached out and put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "I knew it," Arthur said. His voice was shaking a little bit. "I told you, Leo. I told you that you were playing with a genius inside you. I knew someone would hear it eventually." "I'm not going to play on the alley piano anymore," Leo said softly. "I need to practice on the good ones to learn the notes. But I wanted to tell you, because you helped me. Arthur squeezed his shoulder. You don't need to apologize, Leo. That piano did its job. It waited for you. It helped you find your voice. Now it can rest. And I can sit here and drink my hot chocolate. And I can remember the nights when the alley had the best music in the whole city. Leo reached out and touched the broken piano. I'll still come down sometimes, he said, to say hi. I would like that, Arthur said. I would like that very much. They stood there for a while, the old man and the young boy, looking at the broken instrument. The city noise went on around them, the cars honking and the people talking. But in that alley, it was peaceful. The piano was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was full of memories. It was full of the sound of a boy finding his way, and an old man finding a friend. Leo eventually went upstairs to tell his mother the good news. As he climbed the fire escape, he looked down one last time. Mr. Arthur was pouring hot chocolate into the cup lid, looking content. The piano sat in the shadows, broken but beautiful. It wasn't trash anymore. It was a monument, and it would stay there, hidden in the alley, a secret genius that had changed a life.